Peace, you know what this is. Family, today I got to bring you this video by Student White Lies, also known as Professor Black Truth, and he's talking about West Indians in New York. This video, it's kind of long. I want to react to the whole thing, so I might have to break it up into two parts, but I know for a fact he's going to dagger himself in this video. Like he's gonna set himself and the whole FBA hate group up for the kill. Because I saw the thumbnail, and the thumbnail is about there's an article written about 100 years ago about West Indians in New York and how some of them see black people who are already here. But we're gonna get into that. Let's go. And I'm reacting to this video live. I have not watched it before. I just seen the thumbnail and I just wanted to do this video. So here we go.
This is the moment of truth. This morning's briefing dovetails with yesterday's in that we're going to continue discussing the threat to black empowerment that comes from these tethers, but this time we're going to do it with a historical view. So we're going to focus on the fact that there's nothing new about it. I'll be reading an entire article from a publication called Negro Digest. This article in particular came to my attention through Twitter, one of those rare occasions when the website actually gives something good.
Oh, I know exactly who he's talking about, by the way. I already debunked the guy on X. That's the funny part about this. There's nothing you can say about this article that I have not already debunked on Twitter. But anyway, this proves, first of all, that the FBA hate group is already out the gate stupid and doesn't know black history. Because we all know that they was claiming first that black immigrants never was in America before the 1960s and how black people had to fight to get them in here. Then when I prove that that's not the case, what did they go back to? Well, the black immigrants before the 1960s were all good and they had everybody black's back. Now, this article will show you something different. And now he's going to claim that, well, this is nothing new. If it's nothing new, then how come you weren't talking about it this whole time? You've been on YouTube for like, what, 20 years? And now you waited till the FBA hate group came around to talk about this. And y'all was acting like, again, y'all was saying this was something new. Y'all was saying, oh, the black immigrants now ain't like it was back then. And I was the one who pointed out that there's always been black immigrants in America who didn't like black people in America for whatever reason, or just came off like they didn't like you because of they didn't understand the politics of America. And I pointed out how that mentality even goes back to slavery, where the new slave who's fresh from Africa really couldn't understand the old slave, excuse me, enslaved person who was born in America, and how they had to take time to adjust to the new realities. Because America's a one-on-one country with a one-on-one situation. But here we go.
Now, by the way, if that name Negro Digest, if it doesn't even sound remotely familiar, there's a reason for that. It's a very old publication that went out of print a long time ago. The article that I'm going to read for you in its entirety was written by a man named Lennox Raphael, who was of West Indian descent, and he felt moved to expose and call out the rabid anti-FBA hostility from the West Indian immigrants. But that's only half of the reason why I want you to know about this article.
That's not true. That's not true at all. But again, this exposes the whole FBA hate group ideology of how y'all don't know y'all history. I already pointed that out a million times. All the stuff y'all complaining about has always existed and was already dealt with. It's not new. In fact, that just shows that y'all just bozos because black people have never created a hate group in the history of this country. We never created a hate group, especially a hate group against other black people. That never existed, but you guys did. And then now y'all trying to retroactively justify your hate. But we're going to continue on.
The other half of the reason is that this was published in November of 1963. That's before the Voting Rights Act or the Civil Rights Acts were passed. It's before the Immigration and Nationality Act of 65, which lifted the immigration restrictions on black immigrants, was passed. What were the attitudes of these Caribbean blacks towards foundational black Americans before Kamala Harris's allegedly Jamaican father came here to cruise for non-black sex? What were their attitudes before the likes of Candace Owens people got here and the Eric Holders and the Kristen Clarks? We know what the attitudes have been of the Caribbean immigrants who came after 65. But this Negro Digest article, written by a man of West Indian descent, documents what it was before 65, and that this anti-FBA hostility has a long track record. You'll be disgusted by what you hear, but of course not surprised. In fact, the article reads as if we, the New Voices of Black Media, wrote it, even though it was written before any of us were even born.
Exactly. Exactly. First of all, you're dragging it, but exactly. This proves again that you guys don't know Black history like you claimed you did. But I need you to hurry up and get to the article because people time is a wasting. Nobody got time for this. Let's go. Get to the article.
And I should also mention that the person credited with having brought this article to people's attention is a Twitter account under the name Strictly for My NGZ, so salute to them. Now, the title of this article is To Be or Not to Be an American Negro. Some West Indians resent being called Negroes, and yet they are not accepted as white, and they're too well off here to go back to the islands. My aunt was very happy yesterday.
Exactly. So that also proves my point that Black people in America has always had a racial identity, never an ethnic identity. It's never been ethnic. It's always been racial. And people have always bucked against it for one reason or another. And like he said, this is not a prevalent ideology among all West Indians, but we're going to keep it going.
I hadn't seen her so happy for a long, long time. She had become an American citizen. Proudly, she unwrapped the letters from the governor and the mayor and showed them to me. Her happiness seemed so pathetic, so wanting of something which is essential to happiness, belief, that I felt sorry for her. Imagine, she said, hugging me effusively, the governor and the mayor wrote me. That's a fine action on the part of the governor and the mayor, I told her, handing back the standard informal letters which bore the signatures of the two officials, stamped by anonymous clerks. Well, you can stay here for the rest of your life now, I told her. She turned on me as though I had cursed her. Who? Me? Not me and these people. I can never be an American. But you have citizenship now. That doesn't mean anything. Citizenship doesn't mean much to her, she says in an effort to cover up what really means so much to her, a woman past 50 here in the USA for 5 years. She doesn't want to be considered an American Negro. As a matter of fact, she's ashamed of being an American Negro, and this is the standard neurosis of the average West Indian immigrant. He or she does not want to be considered an American Negro. Subconsciously, they believe that the white man prefers them as non-American Negroes. In short, she wishes to be the white man's favorite nigger, and he may well be happy because he seems to be succeeding in dehumanizing himself. This is the color complex of the West Indian Negro, one who doesn't understand the fight for freedom in America, one who doesn't wish to understand it, and one who, even understanding it, doesn't have any sympathy for it. It's a further chapter in the history of the international black man's effort to escape from his skin and his being. I have yet to meet a West Indian Negro who doesn't feel he is better than the American Negro and, therefore, equal to the American white with whom he wishes to associate. Not everybody born in the West Indies can be a Sidney Poitier or a Cleveland Robinson, two of the many West Indians who have entered the mainstream of American life. The majority, whether they come from Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, or Grenada, or any other part of the Caribbean, seek to degrade the American Negro. Somebody once said that the immigrant was a mad dog in search of any bone, and every time he found a bone, he would cross a bridge, look down in the water, see a larger bone, drop his own, and run down the bank of the river to be deceived by his unquenchability. Well, the immigrant Negro in America seems to be the mad dog with a bone in his mouth, constantly dropping it and finding others throughout this long search for an identity. Some time ago, I met a Jamaican in a Greenwich Village bar. I asked him whether he had become an American citizen. No, and never. Soon he was lashing out at the defects of the American Negro and pretending to be holier than they in the castle of his unpopular skin. They are animals, he said. They are this and they are that. I challenged his statements. Oh, you wouldn't know, he parried. You have to work with them. He works with them, with some civil rights organization in New York. This young man is about 26 years old. He came here 3 years ago to study engineering. Now he works part-time with this civil rights organization. But what can he do in the interest of civil rights, buried down as he is with such prejudices? Back in Jamaica, his father is an executive member of some branch of the government, his uncle is an internationally respected writer, and in his island home, he's a prince in a shoe, and nobody dares call him nigger or any name to that effect. But here in New York or any other part of the United States, he struggles. He's a black man, a Negro. So, in order to retain an identity which can set him apart from what he considers the irresponsible mob, he stays in his Caribbean closet. "I'm from Jamaica," he says when you meet him. But he doesn't even have to say it. The exact preservation of his accent will warn you. However, that still won't be enough. To show you how much he's not a part of the American dilemma, he will criticize American Negroes, even going so far as to openly call them niggers. And, as soon as his studies are finished, he intends to return to his island home and become a small bureaucrat. He is not unlike my aunt and the thousands of other aunts there are. My aunt rents a room from a Trinidadian, a woman who is an American citizen, a woman who has children born in America, but a woman who would never stand to be called an American. Because once you make her an American, you make her an American Negro. This woman spends her time thinking so many things of the American Negro that, in attempting to be such a generous thinker, she generally manages to outsay those whites who think the worst of any Negro. They have no morals, she says, because they drink beer out of cans. They don't know how to rear their children. They are lazy and without ambition. We came here, she said, meaning the thousands of West Indians in the States, and in so little time we have educated our children and bought so many apartment houses here in New York. But they, the American Negroes, talk of the South. Why don't they leave the South and come here? You tell me. I told her that hundreds of Negroes leave the South every week in search of a better life, but to no avail, my words falling on deaf ears. She will not rent her rooms to an American Negro without the recommendation of someone she respects. Years ago, she sent her daughter to a predominantly white school, and the child was accepted as an American Negro, which she in fact was. When she discovered that, she branded the child, to the child's protests, by putting gold bracelets on her wrists, bracelets being then a mark of West Indianism. I was talking to another woman. She has 2 children, one at Vassar and the other at Dartmouth. We were discussing the Negro child's search for an identity in America. "Oh," she said proudly, "my children never had those problems. You know, their father and I were born in the West Indies." Immediately, she seeks to unmake their Americanhood. She tells me not to think of them in the context of the average boy or girl because their parents are from the Caribbean. It's the same with almost every West Indian parent in the States. The majority of them believe that the British system of education is much better than the American, and some of them translate their belief by sending their children to study in the islands or in England. One of their standard complaints is that the American child who doesn't have the good luck to grow up in the home of West Indian parents ends up being badly behaved and ambitionless. Children in America, they say, are badly behaved, not like kids in the West Indies, kids who never say no, kids who are completely dependent on their parents, even while in their 20s. They like this type of spineless child, but not the fast-moving American child in this tense and unfaithful society. They believe that the American Negro is ambitionless and uneducated, and they maintain this belief even in the face of strong proof of the contrary, because it's part of the chain of beliefs which helps them to pass their days in another country, a crutch to lessen their insecurity. They want to see the unfavorable, so they see it. "I have never been segregated," says one who has spent 30 years in the white man's kitchen, cleaning his floors and suffering humiliations. "And I don't see why there should be so many demonstrations and so much unrest. I know white people, and they're not so bad." She is serious. "Yes," I tell her, "I know that you know the white man, but you know him too well, so well that you have forgotten yourself." But I'm a fool, she doesn't listen, and I realize she will die believing the same thing, so may God bless her. In the West Indies, everyone jostles for the chance to come to America. Everyone. It's the extensive gold mine waiting for intrepid diggers, and those who are here are generally teachers, civil servants, nurses, skilled persons, and students. They come because they want a better life. They come to study or they come to work. Usually they do both. But there are also those who do nothing. They come out of a society where to be black is a disadvantage. Once here, they start working. Some of them get good jobs. Others work as porters, waiters, etc. But, regardless of what they are doing, they send exaggerated reports of comfort to their island homes, while they suffer what they accept as temporary indignities. The porter seldom identifies himself with the successes or failures of the American Negro. Since he can't get a better job, he offsets the temporary indignity by joining societies and lodges and becoming a leading member. One thing he always says: he is much better off in the West Indies. He may return to live there after some years away, but usually he stays here, on his very tenuous montage, thinking that the fact that he came to America as an immigrant and not as a slave makes him so different from the Negroes whose forefathers were brought here in chains 300 years ago. There is no valid reason for this hysteria and false pride. The fact that the American Negro may have laughed at the African or West Indian several years ago is no justification for sniping for the sake of enhancing one's position in no man's land. We play into the hands of those who hate us most whenever we naively seek to dish out the same medicine which we have been swallowing for so many centuries. Yet, the tragic part of all this is the fact that we are all guilty in some way or the other of this very subtle crime. My aunt is a victim of this society which seeks to put man in different cells of his imagination and milk his essence, what little he has left of it, to divide him and then rule him. And when she tells me she is better than an American Negro, I tell her that what you are is always your constant companion, and you can only run so far. That when we amputate one leg to improve our gait, we stumble and fall into the dust of our souls. Now again, that was published in November of 1963. It was written by a West Indian immigrant, and everything that he wrote there basically was a Cliff Notes version of the entire message of the black media against the tethers and the tetherism.
Okay, that was a lot. I didn't interrupt him. I let him read the whole thing. I want to say there was nothing wrong with this article. What he wrote in this article was always true. But let's get to this. He said this article is about calling out tethers and tetherism and all that other stuff. And this is like a cliff notes. One, you guys said to be what it means to be a tether is to cosplay black people in America. That's why you say they tether. They try to tether themselves to them by cosplaying them. This article is saying that they're not trying to cosplay you. So how are they a tether? Oh, y'all also said a tether is somebody who came to America after the Civil Rights Act was passed and then try to undermine black people after benefiting from it. These people were here before the Civil Rights Act was passed. So I don't understand that. But y'all make it up how y'all go along. And another thing, three things about this article that refutes FBA. One, you claim black immigrants don't call out their own. That's what this article is doing. Two, this article talks about how black people actually started with the name calling. And that's why a lot of them even believe like this and talk like this. Because remember, this is no different, like I told you before, everything goes in a circle. And the same thing keep happening. It's like when the Africans was coming here in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. People was making fun of them, and then they got this chip on their shoulder, and then they started talking crazy about black people. It's the same thing with the West Indians who got here, I think, like in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. Same situation. In the 70s. Same, no, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Same situation. And he talks about how it wasn't that deep and how people got to stop keeping it going. It's got to stop. All this sniping and talking down and all this other stuff about people because of something, a slight that happened or a joke that happened before, that got to stop. Three, he talks about, oh, we need to stop all this division amongst black people and come together. When do FBA preach about coming together? What are you talking about? But we're going to continue and let you keep going.
And everything that he wrote there basically was a Cliff Notes version of the entire message of the black media against the tethers and the tetherism that they bring here. Everything from the old stale talking point of we're doing better in a short time. Well, yeah, when you go from a country that has no economy at all to a place where you can at least get a minimum wage job, I sure hope you can do something with it. All
That wasn't the point of the article. And second, also in the article, it highlights that most of the West Indians who came here were elites in their country. So they were not broke. But we're going to continue on.
the way to the lies about, oh, those black Americans, they're like animals, I tell you. These are people who are actually taking their own self-hate and trying to project it onto someone else. I guess that's how they live with themselves. Now,
What self-hate? They love being Caribbean. They not try, they doing everything in their power to maintain a Caribbean identity. That don't sound like self-hate to me, but we're gonna let you keep going.
obviously, I'm not referring to every single person from the West Indies to a man. The writer of that article is proof that it's obviously not everyone, but the problem is it is the majority. And we don't do ourselves any favors by closing our eyes and shutting our ears to that fact.
Okay, this is a white supremacist talking point, no different than when white people say, well, obviously all black people aren't bad. There are some good ones, but the majority of them are bad, so it's okay to attack them all. Pretty much we have carte blanche to do whatever we wanted to do to them. The same thing with the Nazis. You had Nazis like, well, obviously all Jews aren't bad, but the majority of them are bad, so we got to do what we got to do. Come on, same logic.
This stuff has been going on before 1965. This is a prevailing attitude that they brought here with them. And as the writer said, it's based on nothing, and yet they do it because
No, the article clearly states that this mentality came about when they came to America and were being made fun of. Granted, I'm pretty sure there were some people who felt this way before they got to America and were being made fun of. But it doesn't just say that it just came out of the thin blue sky. But we're gonna keep it going.
it makes them feel good. See, that's what happens when people have to flee from their country. When they choose to do that, how do they feel better about themselves?
They didn't flee. He specifically talked about how these people were happy and felt superior to black people because they came here as immigrants. And they came here as elite immigrants to get jobs or to get education and then go back to their own country. That's not fleeing. Me going to, let's say, for example, Canada to go to school to get an education that I couldn't get in America, and then getting the education and coming back to America and using what I learned in Canada to get money in America is not fleeing. Y'all call everything fleeing but actual fleeing. Black people leaving the South was fleeing. The Great Migration, that is a sanitized term for what was really happening. It was the great ethnic cleansing of the South. That's fleeing. That's why when you look back at contemporary articles, they refer to the black people leaving as refugees. What does refugee mean? That's somebody who flees. That it means to flee. It means you fled. And you can be a refugee in your own country. That's another thing that y'all try to play with. An internally displaced person is a refugee. The only people who make a legal distinction between the two is the UN. And that legal distinction means you're not entitled to reparations either. So I hope you're not trying to go with that. I shouldn't even have gave that away, but we're gonna keep it going.
How do they look in the mirror and not see a failure? Well, what they do is they try to find somebody to dump on. But what happens when you decide
This is projection. This is what FBA does. FBA looks in the mirror and see failures, and then they try to dump on people. These people did not look in the mirror and see failure. These people got jobs. These people got businesses. These people got ownership. Like it was a known fact that a lot of the black property owners in New York since like the 1920s, 30s, till like even now, are West Indian. A lot of the black professionals are West Indian. This is not them looking in the mirror and seeing failure. This is them trying to disassociate with people that they consider to be failures.
to dump on the people who were the only ones who tried to help you? We would have to invent a new vocabulary to properly describe the kind of skullduggery and backstabbing that's been going on, which is exactly what the black media did. We invented
How are they trying to help them? They help themselves. Like again, you getting your talking points mixed up. Remember, you said that the we help black immigrants by fighting for the civil rights movement, and then they coming over and benefiting from it. This article is before the civil rights movement. No, 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 not necessarily before it, but before the victories of the civil rights movement. There was no Civil Rights Act. There was no Voting Rights Act. There was no Immigration and Nationality Act. They was here on their own muscle. But we gonna keep it going.
New terms to properly encapsulate all of this backstabbing behavior and all of this treachery. I've already broken down for you how that talking point about the immigrant who surpassed.
How is people trying to separate themselves from you backstab? Unless you believe that you needed them to unite with you for you to get somewhere. But we gonna keep it going.
The native-born Americans is a socio-political fiction. It's not actually true. Most immigrants, Caribbean or otherwise, do not own townhouses or have big businesses. That's an absurd exaggeration. They always take a handful of exceptions and then try to explode that into a lie.
Nobody said they did. In your own article that you read, they didn't say that. They said that somebody was bragging about how the West Indians own a lot of property and have a lot of property. But they never said they all were like that. And you don't post to compare black people in America to black immigrants. That is an apples to orange comparison. You're not supposed to make it. See, smart people have already broke this down. The problem with you goofballs is that you tried to make the comparison. I mean, racist white people tried to make the comparison. Instead of pointing out that the comparison was illegitimate, you tried to go back and forth with it. And then when you lost, then you try to come back and say, well, it was illegitimate anyway, when you legitimized it by even having the conversation. But we're going to continue on.
Oh, this is everybody who comes from this group. Don't dream. As this article pointed out, a lot of those individuals who come here try to find some way to get into the kind of circles and the kind of places where FBAs happen to be at. Just yesterday, we talked about a guy who had been in the country 25.
No, it didn't. The article, see, he's lying. The article clearly states that they tried to separate themselves and tried to be away from them. It talked about how people were sending their kids to school in the living in America, but they sent their kids to go to school in England or in the West Indies, so kids didn't have to go to school with black people in America. They sent their kids to white schools, and they would put bracelets on them to mark them as West Indian. So how are they trying to get into your space? See, you're mixing and matching your talking points. This doesn't make any sense, but we're going to keep it going.
Plus years. This guy lied and claimed that he was a citizen, and yet somehow this man was allowed to get his hands on a doctorate, and he was allowed to become the school superintendent for a number of school districts. Given his background, it clearly wasn't because he was the most qualified. It's because the white powers that be, they looked at him and thought to themselves, this guy could be useful to us.
It was because he was the most qualified. You just stated that he had doctorate degrees and he had worked as a superintendent in multiple districts. That makes him the most qualified for the job. The only thing that he lied about was that he was an American citizen. I don't even think he even lied about that because we know a lot of these places hire people for positions even though they're not American citizens. So where was the lie? But we're going to keep it going. You just made that up. He was obviously qualified. You didn't say the degrees were fake. You didn't say the work experience was fake. He didn't get fired because he was doing a bad job. He was highly requested because he was doing a good job. He just happened not to be an American citizen. But we're going to keep it going.
And so he was, in more ways than one. But that lie that a number of these black immigrants like to repeat, that they heard from the white supremacists or from bootlicks like Thomas Sowell and other assorted morons, that, oh, these immigrants, they're just better than black Americans because of a superior culture. And they hear that stuff and they're thinking to themselves, oh, so that's the ticket, huh? That's the lick, isn't it? Oh yeah, I go ahead and repeat these talking points. Now I know who to dump on, and this will ingratiate me to the masters, right? When you point out that foundational black Americans also own townhouses and businesses,